Welcome to Babblecom 5. So I've been threatening for a little while to do a recap of Season 4, and my first attempt at this was an epic fail last night because I messed up and left my system sounds on, and they got recorded as well. So you got me and me, so you got me squared, which wasn't ideal. So I'm trying again. So this is what I'm about to start showing you, which is Season 5 of Babylon 5, the last season of the conventional run. And this is the Wheel of Fire. So as you'll see, there's at least one new face there, and if not two new faces in fact, and we'll be introducing ourselves to those characters in due course. But obviously I'm not going to spoil anything for it now, because that's not what I do here. But there will be spoilers for Season 4, because I'm looking through Season 4 here, so run away now if that's going to be an issue for you. I also came across the other night a really good overview that someone had done by Metastatistic, I think his name is, and I've added that to my Babblecom 5 playlist for your reference, because the whole issue with Season 4, and I say an issue, it's not really a negative actually, but what was going on behind the scenes with the studios and the channels that were responsible for broadcasting Babylon 5 at the time was that apparently P10, which is the network that used to put Babylon 5 out, was about to split into two separate, or back into its parent sort of companies. So as a result, Babylon 5 no longer had a home at that point after Season 4. So for that reason, JMS was really pushing the pace to try and resolve all the major plot arcs at the end of Season 4, on the off chance they didn't get a Season 5. What then happened was that at the very last minute, TNT arrived on the scene and took over the show and gave it a home for Season 5. So what that meant was that the original Season 4 ending episode got put in JMS's back pocket, and he filmed a new one, Deconstruction of Falling Stars, which I've covered, and that became the end of Season 4. Which is why it's kind of an odd episode as an end of season's show, because it was never designed to be that. It was new, it was shiny, and the other episode would deal with that, and obviously we'll come to that 6 months odd from now. So what we have as a result is a very sort of compacted season, and I'm going to glance at my screen in order to do this, just so I can try and make sure I don't miss any of the major plot threads. But when you stop and think about it, we see a resolution to the sort of Centauri Narn position. We see a resolution to the Minbari Civil War. We see a resolution to the Earth Civil War, all in one season. And of course the Shadow War is brought to an end pretty rapidly from the start of the season as well. So I'm just going to borrow a Wikipedia page this time to try and not catch myself out like I did last time. So we start the season with both Sheridan and Garibaldi missing. So we get them back over the course of a few episodes. We have Lorien being introduced as a new character out of the blue onto Hadum. Garibaldi is rescued. The League of Non-Aligned Worlds start to fall apart at the seams because they need something to pull them together all the time. They're not much good without a unifying force. But ultimately, we get that back, and we see that on Sheridan's return, he also chooses to deal with the Vorlon ambassador, because the Vorlons have started to move now, so they're getting far more involved than they were before he went to Zahadum, which is actually turning out to be a bad thing rather than a good thing, because they're obliterating planets. So we've now got to deal with both the Vorlons and the Shadows as part of the Shadow War, not just the Shadows. So that's a phase of significant change. And Sheridan starts to bring the League back together again as well, because he's going to need his massed fleet again. And this is where the messianic stuff starts coming in with Sheridan, because everyone assumes that he died on Zahadum, which he doesn't really deny, because he pretty much did. And it's only thanks to Lorien's intervention that he's back. So by the end of episode 6 of the season, we've actually got this final confrontation with all the remaining First Ones, and the Shadows, and the Vorlons, and all of the younger races at Coriana 6. And we also see that Londo has managed to deal with the mad Centauri Emperor. He's given the non-homeworld back to Chakar and the other Narn, and he's got rid of Morden, and all of that is set. But actually, technically speaking, he didn't do what he set out to do, because actually there was still somebody who had been influenced by the Shadows on Centauri Prime, which was, of course, Londo himself. But fortunately, Sheridan's assault pulled away the Vorlon forces from Centauri Prime just in the nick of time. So all of that gets resolved in the first 6 episodes of the season. So had season 4 not been so compacted, we probably would have seen that last a lot longer, I think. But as it is, it works really well, and we get to see Centauri Prime, we get to see Narn. So there's quite a lot of off-station action going on, which again is unusual, given the title of the show. But it massively expands the universe, which is great. So we then have Garibaldi resigning immediately after this very sort of intense period, to everyone's surprise, and he increasingly becomes distanced from the command crew, and he becomes increasingly hostile towards Sheridan as time goes on as well, and doesn't like the sort of messianic nature that he says he's taking on, but actually Sheridan isn't really taking on. It's just how others are treating him. We have ISN doing negative propaganda on the station, which is masterfully done on their part, because they twist everything beautifully, even though they're actually given the out-and-out truth when, as far as it could be given, when they were there. So that's kind of tricky. We then see Delenn going back to Minbar. So again, that's a nice off-station episode, which is completely out of left field. We didn't see it coming, but it gives us this real insight into her personal background, her link to Sinclair, and the leader of the Minbari at the time of the Shadow. It's not the Shadow War. The time immediately preceding the Earth Minbari War, Dukat, who we haven't really seen a lot of to this point, and we see him now. And that relationship between him and Delenn as master and mentor is very, very telling as well. So that's a really nice episode, Atonement. As Earth starts to put pressure on the station, Sheridan responds by sending Franklin and Marcus to Mars to shore up relations with the Martian resistance, because he knows they're going to need their help down the line. And he also starts to explore the telepaths that they have on board as well, and gets Lita involved with that. And we also see that Sheridan launches an anti-propaganda campaign. So he uses Ivanova, good old Zathras, but not Zathras, to form an anti-propaganda channel. And we see that Bester gets involved with that as well. So he actually uses his influence to actually get some of his own people killed, because he wants to preserve Babylon 5 and make sure that Babylon 5 finds a cure for his lover. So interestingly, Bester actually has his own Black Omega Squadron knocked out by virtue of Babylon 5 Star Furies coming to help Earth Star Furies. So it's there's a lot of threads going through this. So Franklin and Marcus get Mars resistance on the side. Delenn finds out about the Drak, which again is something we hadn't known about to this point. We knew that somebody had left Zahadum, but we didn't know who exactly. And we hear that it's these guys who are trying to sort of stir up trouble and have offered themselves as a potential, source of assistance for the religious caste as the warrior caste becomes more heated. And we also there see the sort of the idea of a Minbari, out and out Minbari civil war, which is a contradiction in terms, because Minbari don't kill Minbari, they don't hurt Minbari, but apparently now they're starting to do it by sort of indirect means. So this is something that's completely alien, or should be completely alien to the Minbari culture, but it's spiraling out of control. So Delenn now is faced with needing to go and deal with that situation on Minbar. And that's done very cleverly as well, because Naroon then becomes involved, and there's this question mark over whether or not he's on Delen's side or the side of the warrior caste, and that then resolves itself in ways in which we wouldn't really have expected. And the thing is, again, the Minbari Civil War clearly should have lasted longer than about sort of 3 episodes, which we get an inkling of it, and then it resolves itself really quickly. And it's a good resolution in so much as Naroon is heavily involved in it, and it closes off his little arc really, really well. But by the same token, you just feel that you've somehow been shortchanged. It's a contradiction in terms, because we're getting so much. We've had so much in season 4. We shouldn't really be complaining about this, quite frankly. But you can see how it could have gone differently. Garibaldi, meanwhile, has sort of ended up chatting with these random people who it turns out are linked to a corporate faction on Mars called William Edgar's, and he is very anti-telepath, so Lita becomes isolated because Garibaldi was going to be paying her, but then he can't, so she has to go back to Psychor, with Bester getting the rights to her corpse when she passes, basically, because he knows that she's been augmented. So she gets a pretty raw deal out of this whole season, as we see, but she's critical to it because she also then gets involved with Sheridan's plans for the telepaths that they have, and ends up going to Mars with Franklin to set up that side of things. And so we then have this very sort of direct confrontations with the taking back of Proxima 3 as a starting point, as Sheridan actually takes the war to Clark, using the White Stars and allied Earth ships to start pushing, basically, because he's decided enough's enough. And so the Earth Civil War then really sort of heats up from that point on. But even that is only sort of the 15th episode in, so we're 2/3 of the way or so through the season before that starts to happen, and yet it resolves itself by the end of the season. So again, that's fast, so it's pretty intense. But the fascinating thing is that JMS still manages to find time to give us an entire episode which is just Sheridan in a room being interrogated constantly. Again, that's bonkers. It feels like it shouldn't work, and yet it totally works. And that really disturbed me, that, you know, on my first watching, because I really wasn't sure what the outcome of that was going to be. And it's just Sheridan getting sort of constantly pounded and getting his head messed with, and drugged and starved and sleep deprived. And it's quite, you know, it was, for me at the time, it was really strong stuff. It was powerful stuff. So that gets resolved. Garibaldi, as it turns out, was co-opted by the Psychor to find out what Edgars was doing, and Bester decides to release him from his control at the end of that mission, which means that he's then free to go after Sheridan and free him before he can be moved to Earth, because this is all taking place on Mars. So they get him back, and then it's crunch time. But in the meantime, Ivanova has had to take on an advanced destroyer fleet from Earth and has been critically wounded, and Marcus has sacrificed himself to get her back to the station to fix her at the cost of his own life. So we've got that happening in the background whilst Sheridan is trying to free Earth and stop Clark from burning the planet with its own defense systems. And so we see a conclusion to that. But then on top of all that, we find that these little hints that we've been getting all season about the League have culminated in Delenn proposing to the League that they form a new organisation called the Interstellar Alliance. And what the Interstellar Alliance then looks to do is to bring together the League and Centauri and Narn and Earth into this alliance, which is a completely new concept. But it's actually the logical conclusion of the Babylon project as a whole. So by the end of season 4, we are in this position where all these major plot lines have resolved themselves. We've got a Drac war hinted at, we've got a telepath war hinted at, to varying degrees throughout the season, but also explicitly by Delenn in the closing of the penultimate episode of the season. And then we get Deconstruction of Falling Stars, which kind of looks ahead. And in looking ahead, it's clear that the sort of time scale that was put on Sheridan's life is going to be kept, and that's also going to somehow tie in with when the station's life ends as well. So it really sort of races along and ties in lots of different thread lines and resolves lots of major plot lines. And of course the question now is, because it's done that, what is actually left for season 5? Because we've heard mention of a Dracula, we've heard mention of a telepath war. It's not clear whether or not those are actually going to be season 5 things, or if those were things that happened in the sort of 15 or the sort of 20 or so years that Sheridan's got left to run the Interstellar Alliance in its infancy. So we just don't know. We also know that Londo is going to become Emperor very shortly, and we don't know what's going to happen with that, because we know that the Drac are involved on Centauri Prime at this point, because we know that the Regent has been fitted with a Keeper, as Jack had a Keeper on Mars. So we don't really know what the state of play is going to be with Centauri Prime going forward, and so these are the sort of things that we were going to see in season 5, and we've also, as well, we've had the Third Space film during the course of this season as well, which again was really interesting, because one of the distinctions between what TNT started to do was they seemed to realise what they had, and they really started universe building pretty hard. So we have all the films came about in the TNT. They redid The Gathering, which I've covered. So we had The Gathering in the beginning, Third Space, River of Souls, Call to Arms. 2 of those I haven't done yet for reasons that will become obvious, but it's something that actually sets it apart from Star Trek when you think about it, because Star Trek did start to do these sort of double episodes, and I know that they then got released on DVD as sort of TV movies, but actually what Babylon 5 did was expressly do TV movies outside of the normal run of episodes, which was, I mean, that was pretty unheard of. I can't immediately think of any other science fiction show that has actually done TV films off the back of itself as it's gone along. But, I mean, yes, obviously Star Trek had big ticket Hollywood films, but it never did TV films. So that's quite a bold move on TNT's part. And the shame of it is that when it came to actually continuing the series after the main 5-year run, TNT then just kind of tripped over its own feet a little bit and honked off JMS something chronic, honked off the fans something chronic, and so what should have been another 5-year offshoot, which was Crusade, just didn't happen. It fizzled because there was too much interference from them. So that's a real shame, because we could have seen a lot more of the universe than we did, but JMS didn't want to compromise on it, and at the end of the day, he was forced to step away from it because of what the direction that they were trying to take it in, which is a shame. But that's where I am at the moment, I guess. So we are. I'm about to do the Wheel of Fire, which was released in 1998. That was when that season started, and I should then come to the end of the original run by the end of this year, which should be, by my reckoning, about 25 years since I saw the final episode of the series. I'm pretty sure that's right. I'm actually looking at maybe I'm a year out. Maybe it'll be 24 years after it was originally aired, actually. Yeah, I could be wrong. I'll have to try and figure that one out, I think. Because in my head, for some reason, I had it down as 25 years. But actually, it could have been 1998 that the last episode came out, which would mean it would be 24 years, because it's 2022 this year. So, yeah. But anyway, we'll see. We'll see how we get on. Either way, it's quite a nice time to be doing it. And, of course, we've also got this news about the reboot, which will probably still happen, as I understand it. It hasn't happened this year, which I think was the original plan, but it may well happen next year. I don't think it's been completely ditched. So we'll see. We'll see. So I mean, I hope that's been of use. I mean, obviously the only way you're going to understand what went on in season 4 is to watch season 4, and it's on HBO at the moment at time of recording, I believe, still, and it's this sort of remastered version of it that they've done to some extent. But yeah, it's I think it's fair to say that season 4 is probably it's kind of peak Babylon 5. It's when it really fully hit its stride. It resolved lots of the major plot lines in season 4, and a lot of people sort of season 5, a bit like they do with season 1 actually. But you can't have the full picture of the universe unless you've committed to all 5 years of it, basically, and you've really got to watch that final episode as well. So you got to kind of stick with it and see the end of season 5 just for the final episode. So yeah, so that was the video I was hoping to do yesterday, which is hopefully done better this time round, and I will leave it there. So do stay tuned, and I will keep plodding along. If you'd like me to try and do anything else, just let me know. I recently did Space Above and Beyond as a sort of taster. I haven't had a massive reaction to that, but I know there are people out there who remember that show, so I'll see what happens on that front as well. Alright, cheers for now.